As we get situated here, I will do some brief introductions, go over the format, and we are going to do this at a pretty fast pace. So I just want to encourage the speakers to be brief, because I think one of the things that we want to really try to take advantage of is the expertise and thinking in this room. This is going to be a conversation, and also some highlights from our great speakers. I would be remiss to, not talk about the great work that has happened in California. We have a huge California contingency here. We should have chartered a plane. And specifically, I want to acknowledge Marion Standish, who at the foundation has really led the way in addressing this work. And it's a real honor to have you as a friend and a colleague. So first off, we as a private health foundation come to this work really understanding that we need to change systems and environments to improve access to better choices for communities of color. Part of the challenge that we have in front of us is really how do we make sure that communities of color, Latino communities, Black and Brown communities, Southeast Asian communities are part of their building up their leadership and are part of the solution in addressing these issues. It has to be from all of these sectors, and we have to, at the end of the day, engage the folks who are really impacted by these issues. So with that, I'm not gonna read the bios because we really do not have time to do that. We have an amazing panel in front of us that really represents both the research base and the sort of marketing base and getting sort of the community leadership on the ground so that we can really improve policies to get these sugary junk drinks out of communities. So I'm gonna start with Dr. Gortmaker.
Everybody, thank you for really the chance to be here, and thanks to CSPI for keeping up the fight. We all know about increasing obesity in the U.S. My job here is just to give a little bit of the big picture. It's been increasing among the young, the old, the rich, the poor, Black, white, Hispanic. And from a recent JAMA paper, we know that these trends are continuing. For men, you see increases for all ethnic groups. For women, larger increases for non-Hispanic Black women and for Mexican American women. A paper that I just published with some colleagues, Claire Wang and Tracy Arlenes, indicates how these trends are continuing among children, with also an indication of continuing greater increase in obesity among Black and Hispanic populations. So just to be clear, there's been a lot of talk of, things are leveling off, and there may be some slowing of the growth of obesity in the U.S. in some populations, but that is not generally the case in Black and Hispanic populations in the United States. And we all know the health consequences, they're profound. What's the contribution of sugar-sweetened beverages to this continuing crisis? Well, first, it's important to understand the huge doses. You probably know this, but I always like to do a few calculations. In a paper with Claire Wang and Sarah Bleich, we calculated the estimated use and consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages among kids in the U.S. Based on national data. It's complicated. There are hundreds, thousands of these products. And we calculated through 2004 that kids are consuming about 7 trillion calories of sugar-sweetened beverages per year. I like that number, because it sounds like one of those bailout numbers. At a cost of about 50 cents per can, this is $24 billion a year just among kids. So there's huge numbers. We also found evidence for faster growth of sugar-sweetened beverage intake among young Black and Hispanic populations. And then in further analyses that Sarah Bleich led, we see similar trends among adults and also substantial disparities. When we look carefully at differences by age, there are huge intakes among young populations. Young males, young male adolescents are consuming about 400 calories a day, and young females about 240 calories a day. Now, we all know the strong link between sugar-sweetened beverage intake and excess weight gain. And we've done a bunch of energy gap work that links these excess intakes to changes in body weight. And these kind of levels of excess intake are clearly enough to explain the obesity epidemic in the United States. It's certainly true overall, and it's definitely true for young adults. It's true for communities of color. And so this is kind of the big challenge here. We have a continuing increase of obesity and BMI in communities of color. We have huge intakes of sugar-sweetened beverages at a huge cost, and these are not going away by themselves. They're not going to go away. They're just going to continue. So that's the background. Next.
So we're going to wait, again, to have a really robust conversation at the end. So if Dr. Kumanyika can come up, or would you like to stay there? Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Rudy Ruiz, please come up. Thank you, Shiriki.
Thank you all, and also thank you to CSPI for inviting me to be on this panel. My name is Rudy Ruiz, and I'm the president and CEO of Interlex Communications. And I'm here to bring you a multicultural marketing perspective on the issue. I do want to bombard you with statistics that have been generated through the studies that have already been discussed here today. But I also wanted to bring a little bit of the field into the room. Specifically, my background, I wanted to bring a little bit of the U.S.-Mexico border to Washington today. I was born and raised down there in a place called Brownsville, Texas. It's a place that's about 90% plus Hispanic Latino. And I actually spoke Spanish exclusively for the first 5 years of my life till I learned my first words of English in kindergarten. The place where I grew up runs rampant with poverty and obesity. Definitely the words that resonate with me is when I hear about loved ones being lost to diabetes, heart disease. I saw my own doctor, my own family physician, Dr. Santiago Gonzalez, die of obesity and diabetes slowly and at a very young age. He actually lived across the street from me. Brownsville back then wasn't as booming as it is today. It was a small town. His 3 girls went to school with me. They were still in elementary and in high school when he passed away. And he loved sugary drinks. I remember often seeing him out in his front yard with a big gulp when he came home from his medical practice. He was not alone. Growing up down there, I've seen babies drinking Coke out of bottles. And I'm not talking about Coke bottles, I'm talking about baby bottles. So it's pretty shocking. To be honest, before I got involved in this battle, one of my own favorite childhood memories involved climbing to the top of a mountain in Mexico that leads to some waterfalls, called Horsetail Falls in Mexico on a very hot summer day, over 100 degrees. And when I reached the summit, what I remembered most in my memory was the giant Coca-Cola that I purchased that was, with little pieces of ice clinging to it, and I consumed in quick order more than I remembered the waterfall itself. And as I was growing up, I would replay that memory in my mind, almost like a TV spot, in my mind. And I didn't really see myself the way I really was, because I was actually an overweight child myself. But of course, I didn't see myself like that when I replayed the Coke TV spot in my mind. I just linked it to this emotional, triumphant, happy moment, because that's what the branding has done for most of us. Later, as I kind of grew up, went to Harvard and studied there, both bachelor's and my master's in public policy, and decided to turn my creative energies and enthusiasm and talents into public advocacy marketing. So that's what my agency focuses on exclusively. And we've been working in public health for the past 10 years. I co-founded the agency 17 years ago, and a lot of the work that we've done over the years has been in multicultural communities to try to address health disparities. A couple of years back, as this soda tax battle started brewing, for years we had already turned away as an agency business opportunities with junk food, fast food, beverage type of opportunities, and we decided to really launch ourselves into this battle, and CSPI was wonderful enough to allow us to partner with them and work on this. So we've been the agency that's helped develop the Life Sweeter with Fewer Sugary Drinks campaign that you see here. We've also been able to collaborate with CSPI and Yale Rudd Center on some research about perceptions and reactions to marketing and terminology and so forth. So one of the things that really stands out to me as a marketer is that, and I do have to throw out some statistics, African American children and teens are exposed to 80 to 90% more sugary soda ads than Caucasian children. This is from a report published by the Rudd Center. On Spanish language television, Hispanic children are exposed to 49% more ads for energy and sugary drinks, and Hispanic teens view 99% more ads. This translates into that brand loyalty that I'm talking about. From our own Simmons research database that we use at our agency, I can tell you that 35% of both Hispanic and African American adults say they always look for brand names on packages compared to 31% non-minorities. 24% of Hispanics and 19% of African American adults say they're more likely to buy products from companies that sponsor sports teams or events compared to 11% for non-minorities. Compared to 6% for non-minorities, adults. So all this leads to very sophisticated marketing efforts, which unfortunately I don't have time to go into right now, but perhaps we can dialogue about. And definitely we believe that part of the solution are education campaigns that involve marketing in multiculturally competent and relevant ways that connect emotionally and culturally with the target audiences. We also believe counter-marketing is another important aspect, and I've also written in support of regulation of marketing as well, which probably makes us like the only ad agency in the world that I've heard of so far to do that. And thank you. Thank you. And I do want to say that it's all inspiring to be here for me and for my team. And really kind of what inspires me to continue our work, which has been done in this particular instance, and this work has been completely pro bono, is a vision of someday the world will be filled with kids that when they reach the top of their mountain, they won't remember drinking a sugary drink. They'll remember the effort and the feeling of triumph that they earned for themselves when they got to the summit. Thank you.
Afternoon. I'm going to take just, I hope, 2 or 3 minutes because we want to have some discussion, and points that I don't make in these 2 or 3 minutes I hope we can talk about later. I'm talking from the perspective of the founder and chair of an effort to address weight issues in African American communities, seeing that there was a need for people perhaps with some insider knowledge and a particular commitment to really focus on this issue. And I think my purpose here is really to send a message to leaders in the Black community about our need to take up this problem and bring out the community voice that has the right tone on this problem so that we will support the efforts from the grassroots. And the other purpose, which is complementary, is to reach those who might not have day-to-day contact with African American issues and encourage you to not make assumptions or talk about the population from a distance, but see what the message is that's actually going to resonate with the communities who have to accept the need to change and recognize this as a problem. And I've heard some good examples this morning about campaigns that are appealing to like black parents and so forth. So the short version of what I want to say is that African Americans can benefit more from reducing sugary beverage consumption. Because the consumption is higher, the rates of obesity are higher. We have data linking SSB consumption to obesity and diabetes from the Black Women's Health Study, and dental caries as well as obesity. So we can benefit more, and it's a way of closing disparities, but it's going to be harder. And I'll just spend the rest of the time I have in this overview of saying, giving you my laundry list of all the reasons why it's harder. First, the SSB consumption habits may be more entrenched, and they're certainly more normative, as you've heard from the data that Steve mentioned and Rudy as well. Everybody's doing it, and this is normal. The marketing, you've also heard, is more pervasive and perhaps more effective for various reasons. Black teens, Black and Latino teens are very important populations for marketers of this kind of product, not just to buy it themselves, but to set trends for other populations. The amount of marketing is greater. The media channels used, including outdoor channels, street teams, and social media, it may be more salient because of the channels used, or it may be that the type of marketing is more salient because it's appealing to identity formation of teens and to adults, and very easily recognizable as an ad targeted to you, in the sense that you're a distinctive population. Heavy community sponsorship is a key part, and if I get to say nothing else before Judi gives me the hook, I want to say that I think community sponsorship and the relationship, which is historical, the need for resources and the acceptance of resources from companies who make their money and have their brand on these products is one of our biggest issues to face. So one of the things it does is it effectively silences a lot of Black leaders who would like to talk about this problem, because the funding for their conference or for their scholarship program or something like that may come from these very companies. And until somebody else steps up with that money, this is going to be a hard problem to solve. So I will close with one comment. We've heard about companies shifting to developing countries. Well, we have developing communities right here, the low-resource communities. What we don't want to happen is that the communities of color are not awake, and therefore, when the products can't be sold uptown, they're going to be sold downtown or whichever, depending on where you live. You get the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumanyika. That was fabulous. I do want to just do a brief introduction because we had a switch with the speakers. AyeNay Abye, did I say it? AyeNay. It's a beautiful name. AyeNay Abye is with the Praxis project. She's the field director. She comes to us with some great experience around community organizing, and specifically now is working on issues related to health justice and policy advocacy. So if you can come up and talk about your work, thanks.
For those of you who wanted to see Makani, she looks like me, but bigger hair. So it's usually how people identify Praxis. Oh, the big hair. I want to say thank you to CSPI and the organizing committee and the panelists for this conversation. It's not a start to a conversation, but we're entering an existing conversation. And we're actually entering multiple conversations, especially when talking about communities of color and target marketing. When talking about soda, it's not the only issue. A lot of folks have identified issues around tobacco, alcohol, food, etc. And some key things to highlight from these efforts is that we have many sheroes and heroes in our community that have been on the battle lines of these issues. And the important thing is that we've learned from many of these battles across the country that it's important to fund and resource local communities. So when questions around enforcement come up, like once we pass a policy, what happens? How can we tell if someone's having a 20-ounce soda or a 16-ounce soda? Communities know their neighborhoods, they know what's happening there, and if we look at things around applications for resources, the monitoring, the enforcement, and we look at the whole gamut, then it's important for us to see then these things can be successful when we look at the whole range of policy from the inception to the implementation. One thing that popped out to me earlier when I heard toxicola, I was like, oh, toxicola. Really to think about community participation in terms of a process and not just raising a voice on this issue. So in true Praxis style, I want to do a chant with you guys all. When I say toxicola, you guys are going to say it's not right. Toxicola. It's not right. Toxicola. It's not right. Toxicola. It's not right. So in addressing the it's not right portion, we have to not only look at one element, we have to look at all 4 P's, right? The product, the price, the placement, and the promotion. And so when we're talking about this work, it's important to look at all 4 of them, but it's most importantly to look at it in terms of equity. And when we're thinking about price, promotion, product, and placement, it looks different in many communities, but there are some common trends, and that's around, in communities of color, the true issue is around these predatory practices. We know that there's high obesity rates, high rates of sugar consumption, yet these companies are able to come into our communities, whether it's through sponsoring a baseball field, right? Whether it's through the front of the convenience store, which happens to be the only place where someone can get fresh fruits and vegetables in their community, where it has Coca-Cola, tobacco, and alcohol before you even see the apple. So it's important that we're continuing this conversation. So I definitely am happy to be on this panel and want to continue this conversation with you all. So I want to say thank you again for having us.
Last but not least, Genoveva, oh my gosh, Islas-Hooker from the Central California Regional Obesity Prevention Project, a great partner for us in California, and she's going to share some words of wisdom and some insight, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Thank you, Judi. I'd like to provide a little bit of context of where I'm from in California. The San Joaquin Valley is really the fruit and vegetable bowl of our nation. A lot of you have tasted the labor of the Latino community and all the fruits and vegetables that you consume, hopefully on a regular basis. So the paradox of our region is really, and I'm not going to go through these slides one by one, but I wanted to get to some slides that help me convey through pictures what I want to share with you. The paradox of our region is that in this agricultural abundance, we have people who can't afford to put food on their tables. We're some of the poorest congressional districts in the nation, and that really results from this huge agribusiness that's going on, and it's caused this exploitation, leading a large number of people in poverty, but also a contamination of water tables. And so in many of our communities, there really is a lack of potable water, and that the lack of resources to purchase water really makes soda the default beverage of choice for many of the Latino community members living in the Central Valley. One interesting side note is that California law requires that cool, fresh, clean, abundant water be made to farm workers while they're working. So while they're laboring, while they're picking the fruits and vegetables for the nation, they can have water. But so what if they go home and they can't drink the water? So what if their kids are in schools where they can't drink the water? So what that many Latino children are required to take their own water to school if their parents can afford to send them with that bottled water. And many of our athletes are suffering dehydration because the school can't provide clean water to them, and they can't often produce it for themselves. So it becomes really a challenge in terms of the preservation and promotion of health, people doing the behaviors we want them to do without the right resources to quench their thirst. This slide, what I wanted to show you is really the nitrate contamination, some of the water coming out of faucets, like the agua from Ducor there is really brown. And if you were needing to purchase water, the cheapest water you were going to be able to get is about 20 ounces for $1. But if you were limited and you had a family of 4, which is about the average, you'd probably opt to buy this, which is 2 liters for just $1.75, right? And so you can make that choice more often because it's what you can afford. So the solutions, what we've been working on have been things like empowering residents to be advocates for the change they want to see in their community. And that's led to things like moms working on getting water stations in their schools. It's led to things like parents organizing to ensure that their school boards can adopt removal of sugary drinks from their menus. And I'm happy to say that we do have school districts that have completely removed that from them. But in closing, I guess what I really want to get to is that just the mounting opposition of this work is really tremendous, and it requires all of us working together. And so some of the pushback that we get is, let market forces decide this. Market forces will change this. And when you live in a community where your only option is this that you can afford, market forces will not change that. If people are continuing to purchase soda, that's what will continue to be reinforced. We hear that we need more research to show the evidence, right, this causation. In Latino communities, we don't need the evidence. Our community members are dying. Yeah. You need the evidence to help convince the people of power to change, but the Latino community sees the evidence, and we need the change. Nanny state, the last one, my favorite, and I'm going to drop off. We already live in a nanny state, right? A nanny state that's perpetuated by corporate greed. Bad nanny lets us drink all the soda we want. And what we really need is a responsible nanny that's going to make sure that we grow up to lead the full lifetime that we have been given. And, in my last outreach, I just want to say that we have to stop things like this. The marketing to the Italian community is horrendous, as you can see with the red, white, and green piñata in the background. They're Latinos, right? Thank you.
Great. So again, thank you to the panelists for the great brief remarks, and we're going to get into the meat of it, and this is where we want to have audience participation. Before we, I could see you all, rushing the stage right now. So before we actually get to that point of the conversation, would like to just ask the panelists, in your respective work, what do you think it's really going to take to get communities of color engaged in this conversation in a deep, meaningful way? So I will open it up to the panel for a few responses.
I'll start by saying that I think it's going to take a different type of participation from people who do business with the Black community, because a lot of this is economic. And right now, the sources and the resource base is working against us. And so I don't know the answer, but I think that we need the other parts of the system too. We need the social marketing and so forth. But when people are looking to a fast food company or a soda company to get a scholarship to put their kid through school, then you're not going to have much of an argument until you can do something about that.
I would say, is this on? Yeah. Okay. So I would say that a lot of the issues that are impacting the Latino community is that they oftentimes come from home countries where the water quality is also bad. And so they've been conditioned to sugary drinks. And so there is a lot of awareness building that needs to happen in terms of the detriment of so much soda consumption. And I think that there is also empowerment that needs to happen in terms of helping to highlight what they can do from a policy and environmental change level to galvanize that change within their communities. And so leadership development, helping to build more awareness, I think are key.
In addition to that, as I was saying earlier, communities of color, this isn't something new. These predatory practices, I think it's about building mechanisms for community control over their own resources and access to basic human rights like water and food. And I think building that out, in addition to what these two have said already, it's really about looking at, the focus should be on fixing the problem and not blaming communities. And if we put our policy in that direction of fixing problems that are systemic and not just blaming communities to say, oh, they have higher rates because they're just consuming more. It's not just about their consumption, right? It's about the other piece.
And I think of engagement of youth, or empowering youth, is really critical. And I think one of the kind of lost opportunities up till now has been any engagements of any major sports figures in this issue. Major League Baseball players lie to kids every night when they drink Gatorade. I'll take that back. When they drink water out of Gatorade containers. And they're required to do that by a lot of the ballparks. And the fact that nobody talks about that, you know, people lie about steroids and they lie about water. This is a lost opportunity. Why don't some players step up and say, hey, I drink water? I don't see anybody here from the Major League Sports world. But there's just too much money. And I think it's a great opportunity, and I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, you know, I'd like to echo that and add to it that the marketing approach of the sugary drink manufacturers involves, you know, these sophisticated cross-platform strategies that involve the sports, entertainment, celebrities as well, the social media, the massive advertising, the community sponsorships. It's just so comprehensive, you know, they're everywhere, which is obviously their goal. And it really will take leadership, like breakthrough leadership, where you have major sports celebrities, major entertainment celebrities. That will definitely add a huge you know, amount of attention to it. And as the research shows, it has even a greater cachet with multicultural communities when these types of personalities get involved. I think that the other aspect of it is that in our efforts to educate through public awareness and public education campaigns, we have to be culturally relevant because that's what we're up against. You know, we've seen some great examples here today of just the techniques that they use. And if we had more time, or if we have time and you guys want to watch a TV commercial, I have one there that we can look at that really shows how they tap into things like familismo, which is this strong family dynamic in the Hispanic culture, collectivism, you know, aspirational aspects of the culture to, you know, be part of the American dream. The research that we conducted with CSPI and Yale showed that too, that people, minority consumers really associate sugary sweetened beverage brands with patriotism and with being American. And then on the flip side, sometimes they associate them nostalgically with their homeland because they also had them certain brands back wherever their ancestors came from or where they came from. So funding for comprehensive efforts to counter is, as we've heard today, just a huge challenge. And that's the other piece of the puzzle, because you can't get the celebrities and the entertainers to really play ball if there's not money involved, unfortunately.
Any questions from the audience? I think someone will come with a microphone. I see 3, 4 people in the center here. If you could state your name and your organization, that would be great too.
Hi, my name is Susan Motika. I'm from the Colorado Department of Public Health, and I have two questions. First of all, you were describing from Praxis the community organizing efforts just a little bit. If you could give us a little bit more background on what communities are doing to drive, if they are, policy and environmental changes, what changes you have seen, and then to Genoveva, if I said your name right, on the environmental side, what support are you getting on your water issues from local, county, state, or federal environmental and public health? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. First, I want to start by, I hear the word organizing a lot, and I want to kind of define what I mean when I say we organize. I want to say that organizing means we are accountable to a process and accountable to the entire process around engaging communities from the beginning to the end. And so from an organizing perspective, Praxis, we support groups across the country, but one initiative in particular, and you can find all this online, is through communities creating healthy environments. It's an initiative that we support through RWJF. And the website you can go to is www.ccheonline.org. And some of the issues that our groups are working on is really looking at the intersections. And it's very interesting that you can use the same tactics actually that folks are using around food and around water to seriously address some of these soda concerns that folks have been bringing up. But one group in particular that we support in Chicago is a group called Iman, and they're working with Black Muslim and Arab Muslim communities in their neighborhood on corner store issues. And so they initially entered the campaign through the Fresh Food Financing Initiative, but they actually are trying to address issues, like I was saying, around alcohol consumption, around tobacco use, and also around fresh fruits and vegetables in their corner stores. So they're tackling all these issues in one way, because like I said, the issue of predatory marketing is not just happening on one level with soda, it's an issue in the community overall. So that's a great group that's been working on that as well. And another group is in South Los Angeles. It's called, the organization is Community Coalition. They have been running a neighborhood kind of parks campaign. And through their parks campaign, they've been working with surrounding businesses. And so they passed a nuisance abatement policy to say within a certain area where young people are playing at these parks, then you cannot have things like high sales of alcohol, tobacco, and they're also talking about the issues of soda. And so how all these things intersect together. So there are some promising practices and policies that folks have passed that definitely speak to the issue of soda consumption.
So I think the other part of the question was support around the water issues, is that right? Did I get it? Okay. So interestingly enough, a lot of the recent legislation has been what's supporting greater opportunities to get access to water. So in California, someone's going to have to help me out, SB 1413, thank you. And then the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act that's also encouraging or requiring water be available in schools. And so because of that, we've seen things like water stations being established in schools, and that there is growing sort of movement to utilize that opportunity to also support greater access to water within communities, although there's nothing like completed for me to report on yet. In terms of local support, in the Central Valley, this is a very divisive issue because a lot of the water issues get framed around water for farming. And so there is sort of this denial about, community members really not having access to potable water. And the truth is that many of those community members are living in very rural and incorporated communities, and that their electeds are not really responding to those challenges. And we've had conversations where they've said, well, it's just going to cost too much money to fix their water systems, they should move. right? And these are very impoverished people who really don't have the luxury of just being able to pick up and move. And so we're saying that it is a costly issue, and it costs in terms of the lives that these residents are suffering. And the fact that many of these community members will report that they are burying their relatives in pieces because of the diabetes epidemic that's being experienced there.
I think the woman in the red jacket, I'm sorry, I could barely see you.
My name is Bonita Curtis, and I live in the District of Columbia. I'm originally a home economics teacher, urban and regional planner as well. In terms of policies that affect the health of the children of the nation's capital, about 15 years ago, they took home economics out of the curriculum, which really had a tremendous impact. And I hope that that impact is not only in the nation's capital, but it's being felt across the nation, because we are an endangered species. I had the honor of continuing my education, so I'm also a chef, and I'm now out in Prince George's County, Maryland, teaching at Fairmont Heights High School, culinary arts, foods and nutrition, etc. One of the things that I believe, and I didn't really hear it except I think the professor from the University of Pennsylvania speak, and here's one of my colleagues, Kathleen Zook from the University of Maryland. I have about 150 students who are part of a club that I call the Royal Chefs Club, and we partnered with the University of Maryland with their shift program to change what's happening with the available food in surrounding about 4 or 5 surrounding small towns. And what we found is that youth have power. We could take 100 of those youth, they make 10 phone calls, because we found we had absolutely no nice restaurant that sold healthy foods. There were only fast foods and greasy spoons. And even in the local supermarkets, they were taking off, and I'm talking about supermarkets the size of Safeways and Giants and Shoppers Food Warehouse, and they were reducing them by 1/3 of the size and putting junk food in the produce area. And so these youngsters called maybe 10 folks, 10 relatives, 10 friends saying, say something to the owner of that supermarket about what you've done. And then they were told to tell 10 more people. And it's amazing the power of youth, and in this, what we're talking about today, what schools can do in terms of education and in partnering with universities. And again, I'm just honored to be here and to just share what we're trying to do, and with the University of Maryland and their public health department as well.
Great. Thank you, Bonita, for sharing your story. I think one of the things I just want to ask the panelists from that reflection is, I think there are a lot of great models of youth engagement and youth empowerment, youth leadership, youth organizing. And I think one of the things for this panel in particular, because we're talking about communities of color, is how do we activate that? How do we make that sort of a long-term partnership at a level that's scalable? So I don't know if anyone on the panel wants to sort of highlight that, and then we'll take 3 more questions from the audience, and then we'll go from there.
I'll comment because our organization is engaged in a study of a social media-based youth counter-marketing program that's really intended to be a food and a sugar-sweetened beverage type version of the Truth Campaign, although, hope we're nowhere near the level of the Truth Campaign in the tobacco area. I think there are a lot of youth efforts all over the country that we see, but I don't know that anyone has organized them in a way that they would have power. The youth, once they get it and they run with it, and our campaign is completely youth-led. It's not our telling the youth what to do. We've got a couple of rap artists who not only develop song, but the songs that they developed about the issues of like sugar-sweetened beverage and fast food are more popular than some of the other songs that, so they're incorporating them, mainstreaming them into their work. So I think if we need more of a national effort to bring these youth efforts together and see how we can scale them up.
From a marketing perspective, I just wanted to add that social media is obviously the way to go, and that that is another key. The national effort that you mentioned, Professor, is key because that's what we're up against. And it's great to see, you know, we ourselves were part of the Communities Putting Prevention to Work funding for anti-obesity campaigns. We were the agency for the campaign in San Antonio. It's great to see all of our communities doing this great work that's research-based, that's very community-based, but we are missing a national kind of opportunity to coalesce around a strategy like that, around a brand, and create a movement that can really energize, you know, across the country. And I think social media is probably the way to do it because of the costs associated with mass marketing, and obviously social media allows for a model where the people can do it themselves. The power is with the people. The other thing I was going to add why I think that's also so effective is because our research has also shown that the most motivating thing for parents, multicultural parents, to make a change is the health of their children. So if the youth are bringing them the message, and they're a lot more likely to receive it.
I would say, actually, there's an organization, a national alliance called the Alliance for Educational Justice. And the issue you brought up around kind of curriculum and space and time for home ec, and not only home ec, but nutritional programs as well as PE or anything that's actually directly affecting young people's health. They're addressing that at a national level and within their own states and regions. There are actually over 50 organizing groups from across the country led by young people. And the website is allianceforeducationaljustice.org. And you can see what they're doing in terms of kind of shifting curriculum and practices within schools. I think another thing is a group in Southern California, Inner City Struggle. They are working on, I guess it's called, they've created a community school. And they established the newest high school in I think over 42 years in East Los Angeles. And in that high school, they have a comprehensive health program where not only are they working within the school, but around the school. You know, with young people most of the time not getting proper nutrition in school. They don't like the lunch in school. They go outside of school. What do you have outside of school? Gas stations, liquor stores. So there's a relationship not only with the school lunch program and competitive foods on campus, but what's up with the competition right outside campus when they're allowed to leave. And so ICS is also working on that issue directly. So I would say those are two great resources. Another emerging resource at a national scale is the National Grassroots Youth Caucus, and National Grassroots Youth Caucus, and that's spearheaded through another coalition based in Chicago called Life Coalition, and they've been working with Congressman Bobby Rush on youth employment. But they're tying youth employment to youth participation in local government and also local decision-making power. And one of their main issues is actually around nutrition and health for young people. So that's another great resource. Oh, and finally, my own resource, I almost forget. You're always like promoting other people, you forget. Get Free. It's a website that is actually through communities creating healthy environments, and it's for young people to talk with each other from across the country of what's happening in their community, to share resources with each other on how they're tackling some of these issues. And you can get that website. The URL is fuelingrevolution.org.
I hope you're writing very quickly. Another question from the audience. Over here, there's 3 people, thanks.
Hearn with the Pew Charitable Trust, very clear today with Mayors Nutter and Bloomberg that political leadership is such a difference. So if we could ask our panelists, if you were the mayor of your community, and given your insights and thoughts on what we can do from a policy standpoint for our communities of color, what would be your top platform? What would be your top issues, and then how can we get you elected?
Well, I hadn't thought about running for office, so this is going to be, I think I would work on food prices and beverage prices, because I think the point made is that as long as your best buy is unhealthy, you can't really expect people to choose the things we want them to choose. So that's where I put my efforts.
I would focus on education for parents with young children, and I think that would probably be the most effective, best return on investment within the population in San Antonio, which is where I live. And I also think that very strong Spanish language component would be very important there, because over 50% of the population there is Hispanic as well.
Since we're going down the line, I'm from around Boston, and I think our mayor's done a pretty good job, but he's done a couple of simple things: get all the sugar-sweetened beverages out of the school, as Ann was saying before, and now trying to make sure water is available everywhere, and then getting them off of government property. It's a good way to get started. It's not as aggressive as some of the other strategies, but it's a good way to get started, and it won't get them kicked out, I guess, right away.
I think that I agree with both the idea of ensuring access to water and fruits and vegetables, the healthy stuff, making that affordably priced for people. I think those are good strategies. And then I also think that it's important to also mitigate the over-promotion of the unhealthy, so restricting that so that there aren't these continuing cues of, get sexy, get rich, get happy, buy 32 ounces of something.
I would say a living wage. Most folks, when we're talking about communities of color, we're also missing the issue of class here, and people being able to afford certain things as they all have highlighted. A report was just released yesterday from Restaurant Opportunity Center and the Food Chain Workers Alliance, highlighting that most folks who actually work in restaurants, communities of color, they have a higher rate of as SNAP recipients. They don't get a living wage. We actually, they don't even have access to fruits and vegetables in their own community, yet they're serving food all day to other folks. So I think living wage is an important issue that cuts across all of these.
Great. 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up. You have to get the mic quickly. 2 folks, please. I know we're standing between a lot of hungry people and lunch. Great, thank you.
Hi, one of the things I just wanted to note, and thank you for the panel, is that since we're talking about communities of color, is taking into account the fact that there's different patterns across different ethnic groups in consumption of SSBs. So my recent read of the NHANES data, for example, are showing that actually white children and youth actually consume more soda, but black youth consume more fruit drinks. So we really need to make sure that we have policies, first of all, that are broad and that actually cover all SSBs, because if we focus only on soda and pop, then actually we're really only addressing the problem among white youth and children and not as much to the same degree among minorities. So even just looking at the name National Soda Summit, we've really got to make sure, I know we've got sugary drinks, but we've got to make sure that the policy, so we don't want a tax on soda, we want a tax on all SSBs. We don't want a policy that limits certain types of drinks and vending machines only to one kind. So I just wanted to bring that point up to make sure that we're really broad so that we actually address the problems for all different types of ethnic groups in the U.S.
Any quick responses from the panelists? No?
Totally agree.
We agree.
Okay, great.
From Boston. I want to ask about equity issues and pricing, particularly taxes. I've had several conversations with community leaders from, communities of color in Boston, where we're not working on the tax issue, but who are very opposed to the SSB and junk food taxes because of they're fundamentally regressive, and even issues of differential pricing in workplace cafeterias for SSBs. And I was wondering if anyone would comment on that and how to frame the conversations and engage communities of color as these issues roll out across the country.
I was going to say, we've modeled this out a bit, and when we think about it, if like a state like California with a 1 cent per ounce tax could bring in about $1.4 billion a year, and you could earmark a good chunk of that for programs in lower income populations. I mean, maybe not all of it like they did, although the tobacco thing passed, right? They were successful, but you could, the earmarking often really helps there. I mean, that's one strategy.
So I think this is something to be sensitive to. And I think that that's why the importance of ensuring access to water, right? That if we are going to tax, that we need to make sure that free water, that potable water coming out of the tap is there, that there is an option. And I mean, I think for me, in my own experience, it is a shame that relatives couldn't afford the diabetes medications. Right? They couldn't afford the treatment or access to healthcare, but they could afford the soda. Right?
Yeah. Just one comment on that. So if I say pricing, I don't think that taxation is the only pricing strategy to consider. I think we should look at retailing practices. Everything, 75% of the products you're offered these days are advertised as a discount, for example. And so there's a lot of options and latitude people have in the way they price things. And I think we should be creative in looking at how to advantage healthy foods in the price structure without necessarily relying on a tax that could have, where we don't really know how people are going to respond to it until it gets to a certain high level that it becomes obvious. So I think pricing broadly defined and advertising of prices that are competitive for healthy foods may be some other things to think about.
Great. We had, I believe, 2 more questions. Yes or no? You were very persistent. Did you? Mine was actually okay. And anyone else from the panel or from the audience want to bring up a question? Looks like one more, and this will be the last one, and then we'll close it up. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name's Anne Quinn-Coeur. I'm here from Baton Rouge, and I came late because it's hard to get to Washington from Baton Rouge, as yesterday it was anyway. But I'm running a cooking camp for children, low income, at Southern University, and I haven't heard this mentioned. I got here late. Sweet tea is my biggest problem. Gallons of it, they seem, and also the water quality is very bad. I'm living in the dorms. You can't drink the water. So, it's sweet tea. I'd just like to add that to the mix.
Great. Well, first of all, a hand for the panel. Thank you so much. A quick summary of the conversation, because it was really rich, and I know we want to get on to lunch and go to the bathroom, make calls, do emails, and about 20,000 other things we all have to do. I think some things sort of echoed for me is really this issue with communities of color around the emotional and cultural component of this work. It's not just about drink less. It's about, this is part of their sort of culture. It's something that is just part of their family upbringing and something that we can't ignore. The need to really fix the problem, not blame the individuals. I think for communities of color, it's really important that we don't just say, you're doing a bad thing. How do you become part of the solution? If we perpetuate that notion of blaming them, we're not going to have any success in working with these communities. What I heard loud and clear also from the panel was really more leaders. We need to sort of think outside of the box. How do we bring in sort of more cultural leaders, more athletic leaders, representing this issue in a different way to really kind of crack through those cultural emotional tugs. And I think the one thing that was addressed was around economic forces. And I just want to close with this, that we are here talking about soda. I agree with one of the persons in the audience who brought up this issue. This is about more variety of sugary drinks that are pervasive in communities. It's not just about soda. And the person from Baton Rouge who brought up the sweet tea. So we have to talk about the range of options and how do we sort of address the economic forces behind how communities of color are really representing the agenda of industry, because there is no alternative to fund the great work that they want to do. And if we don't address that in a meaningful way, we will continue to fight an uphill battle. So again, thanks to the panelists. Thank you all. Enjoy your lunch.